What's going on, everyone? Today we have the tier list for patch 16.7. There's a new comp out there that we're going to cover because there was a small patch right before the TFT World Championships. Let's start off at the top. We're going to cover how to play each and every one of these comps and also give you kind of like a game plan on how to navigate this whole patch. So let's start off in the S tier. We have Annie, Sylas, and Mel Fast 9. So Fast 9, as predicted in the patch preview, is still going to be the dominant way to play. Not dominant, but like the best way to play if you can get the start for it. But then after that, you may have noticed that the Ryze comp dropped a little bit. The reason why is because the Ryze nerfs just hit a little bit harder than the stuff that affected the other two Fast 9 comps. And there's also the rise of Demacia Kai'Sa. So you essentially have two Demacia comps that you could play around with. You could do Demacia Ryze or Demacia Kai'Sa. Both versions are very good. I personally like the Kai'Sa one a lot because it opens up a lot of level 8 possibilities to play around with, and pretty much if you get a Vayne, you can just get into this very easily. Kai'Sa can be built in all sorts of different directions, AD or AP, and we'll discuss more about that comp a bit later. After that, we have the AD Fast 9 with Draven, Ionia Ahri, Targon Malzahar, Noxus Reroll, Jinx Flex, Ionia Yone, Bilgewater, Void Kai'Sa, and then the Ixtal Fast 9. And then in the B tier, we have the everything else. B tiers are not awful, as per usual. There are still times and place for them. But because a lot of the S and A tiers, they're kind of flexible, you know, like the Fast 9 is pretty flexible. Ryze, you have like 10 different versions of Ryze. Draven, you have like AD Fast 9, you have like 10 different versions of that. A lot of these just have a lot of different versions. So I would just stick to the S and A tier for like maybe 90% of your games this patch. And then the other 10% dip a little bit into the B tier. But one thing to note is that Piltover T-Hex still god-awful. You can check the stats on teamfight.lol, like T-Hex is averaging 5.01, like pretty bad, right? Almost no one's playing it too. You can see the play rate at 0.1, so it's both not played and also performing really badly when it is played. So let's go over the comps. Let's start off with Annie, Sylas. So Fast 9 AP going to be still the way to go because Annie, Sylas plus the Mel both use very similar items. Annie really likes the double mana item, so if you ever get like 2 tiers at the start of the game, you don't need to make blue buff. You could save it and build the other components. I really like Adaptive Helm, as we talked about. I guess throughout the many years that we've been on this channel, Adaptive Helm is probably one of my favorite items ever since they made it, because it just gives you items that you can use and get value from throughout the whole game. The benefit of it in this comp specifically is that it is one of the better items on Annie, but pretty much this comp just uses a lot of tiers. You need 3 at least. So 2 tier items plus a Void Staff going to be the best in slots on Annie. Azir pretty much likes Jeweled Gauntlet plus attack speed. Sylas likes Jeweled Gauntlet plus a healing item plus some defensive item, doesn't really matter which. And then Tibbers likes your typical tank item. So this comp works out really, really well if you get an Econ Augment. Econ Augments are kind of the name of the game right now. We have here as the main ones like Level Up and Upward Mobility. Like it doesn't matter what you like. Honestly, just click the augment thing, just add any of the Econ Augments and you're going to be more than good to go. Obviously, seeing it in a guide and seeing it in your game are two different things, as you can imagine. So if you don't get the Econ Augments, guess what? Do not Fast 9. Play some of the other comps, which we'll cover. But this is a very solid comp. It does have a budget version without the Shurimas, but Shurimas definitely are very welcome. Pretty much all you really need is 4 Arcanists, which is very easy to get. It's Annie, Tibbers, and Sylas. People like adding in the Swain because he's a 4-cost unit and he has an AoE stun. And then after that, like the rest of your units, they just need to be solid units. So Shyvana makes a lot of sense because she's Juggernaut with Swain. You need some defender with Sylas. So if we look at the defenders, there really aren't that many good options, to be honest. That's kind of why people like playing Vi with the Seraphine, and then Seraphine matches up with the Azir pretty well for Disruptor, which is just a nice little support trait. It's not going to make or break your game or anything like that, but that's kind of why people play Vi. You could also play Neeko instead of Swain and Vi, and then for the rest of your team, you just play literally random units. But those are kind of the options to like build your team off of something else. The main core, again, is just going to be Annie, Tibbers, and Sylas. But let's move on into the next team comp, which is going to be Mel Fast 9. This one's a little bit more situational, I think, because you really want to play this from Noxus Opener. You don't have to play Noxus Opener. It's just easy to do. It's like if you want your kid to be a professional ice skater or something like that, you might want to start them on skates early, right? That's kind of what like getting early Noxus is. But if you get something else, if they're just like generally very athletic and something else and then learn ice skating later, like they're probably still going to do okay, but it's obviously going to be ideal if they learn ice skating as early as possible. So in the Noxus comp or the Mel comp, you want to get Noxus as early as possible just because it's a nice little thing to snowball with. But you can play this from pretty much any AP opener, same with the Annie board. So that's pretty good news. And then you also just need to also have a lot of econ. That's going to be through the augments, so pretty much anything that gives you gold. It doesn't matter if it's like prismatic, gold, or silver. Like obviously prismatic's going to give the most amount of gold. But if you get like a gold econ augment, that's more than enough to go fast 9 if you are able to do like a semi-win streak. But items pretty much the same. You want Void Stat plus a mana item and then a Jeweled Gauntlet. Sylas items pretty much the same, doesn't really matter. And then the rest of your team comp, you have the random legendary package, Fiddlesticks and Shyvana, and then Taric and Darius are nice to have. So Darius works because he is both a Noxus and a defender. So for Sylas, he's defender. For Mel, he's Noxus. So that takes care of like 10 birds with one stone. And then Azir's good because it gives you access to Nasus, which is a much needed tank in this comp because you just aren't that very tanky in this team comp. So Azir's nice for the soldiers. Nasus is nice just because he's a 4-cost tank, which has the power of like maybe a 4.5, 5 cost, just because he's a Shurima unit. So this team comp, very, very solid. You just need to get the right start for it. And then, yeah, if you ever get AP win streak opener, go one of these 2 comps depending on your items or what you're hitting that game, and then yeah, you're probably gonna get at least second, if not a little more. But next build up we have is going to be the Demacia Kai'Sa build. So this Kai'Sa build is one that I really like a lot because it just feels a lot more consistent. But obviously the high roll condition is going to be getting an early Vayne drop or getting a very strong Demacia opener to get into this comp very easily. So what you want to do, and the good news about this comp is that pretty much any items fit here. Obviously some are going to be better than others, but we could take a look at the Explore tool by going to Stats Explorer on teamfight.lol, put in Kai'Sa, and then we could look at the traits and then go to Demacia. So people like to do this with 5 Demacia because you're able to fit in a bunch of different long shots. And then we could go into the items. So right now, the AD version going to be doing a little bit better than the attack speed AP version. So if we put in Gwynsu's, we'll see that she's doing like 3.99. You added some of the other stuff, it's going to be like 3.9, somewhere around there. However, if you do the Infinity Edge plus the Shojin, which is typically the build you do with AD Kai'Sa, it's going to be slightly better, but obviously like both versions are fine. You don't really care that much. You really just need to get into the comp. So what else can you do with this comp? Well, you need a secondary carry. So the 2 options are going to be reroll Vayne, which is going to be 3-star Vayne, or going into a Ziggs. So Ziggs is really good if you have the utility items, like a red buff on Ziggs is absolutely bonkers busted. If you get a lot of Kraken Slayers for some reason, then Vayne's going to be really good. I'd say the most important item in this team comp is going to be the bows. I think that's why people go the AD Kai'Sa a bunch, because getting IE and Shojin, it doesn't cost any bows, and then you can save the bows for either Ziggs or Vayne. So in some cases, it can be a little bit easier on the item economy if you do that route. But honestly, you don't really care. You just play whatever items you're given and just slam them early because you want to play around with your strong Demacia opener. For your other units, you want to drop in Kog'Maw. He gives Void plus Longshot, and then Garen's going to be your main tank in the front with just a standard tank items. After that, you do have a bit of breathing room in this comp, so you can just play a Taric or literally anything else you feel like. Swain's a very good addition because he gives you Arcanist plus Juggernaut with Poppy and Kog'Maw. And then obviously Galio's going to be your +1 on your bench, doing a lot of work there. Very solid comp overall. I'd say this is pretty easy to play. Not the easiest comp in the world, but the only real decisions you have to make is whether to reroll for Vayne or go up for Ziggs, and deciding whether to go the comp or not, because this comp is very good early and mid game. So if you choose the right spots to play this, you just get a free game pretty much. But you can check out the full guide on the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta. We have stuff like Void mod priorities, such as Leeching, Nucleus, Spitter Spines, and then that's going to be better than Adrenaline modules, but obviously you just take whatever you can get. I wouldn't like just avoid the comp if you get the worst one, but obviously it's going to have to be made up for by having an even better opener than you normally would ask for. Next build up we have is going to be the Ryze Fast 9. So the Demacia Ionia plus Freljord board is pretty solid. That's the one you see here right now. If you ever get an extra unit slot, you could always add in a Taric to also get Targon. And the more regions that Ryze has, obviously the better. But this one's a solid level 9 build you have here. You got 4 traits, which are all pretty good. To unlock Ryze, you only need 3 of them, but having more regions in just makes him a little bit stronger. For items, you just need mana item, jeweled gauntlet, plus third item. People really like the void staff on him because he just applies it to a lot of different units. And in this case, his mana regen item is going to be the Nashers because it gives you bonus mana on crit. That's why you want to pair it with the jeweled gauntlet. In the front line, you have Garen as your main tank, and then Set, Volibear, and Galio can all hold your leftover items. Just make sure you have anti-heal in this build. Some people like putting it on Lissandra. If you have a Sunfire cape, you could put it on Garen or Braum. By the way, Braum is also a very capable tank if you don't get Garen 2-star. But even though this comp got nerfed, it's still very powerful. And the reason why you would play this over the other AP Fast 9 comps is if you get a Galio unlock pretty easily. So if you have Demacia opener and you're able to get the upgrades for Galio, great. If not, you could go some of the other APs. Another reason to go for this comp is if you get the unlocks for Kennen and Kabuko. They're not that hard to unlock anymore, but it's still a barrier sometimes. So that's kind of another reason to go this comp, because if you just get the units, it's a lot easier to play. But yeah, fielding 6-star levels in Bruiser, Yordle, or Invokers at level 6, like that's pretty easy, right? You don't need to like do anything crazy to manipulate your board like we had to do in previous patches, but overall, very good version here. The Shurima version's also pretty solid. Shurima's just really good on Ryze, and then Azir's just a solid unit right now. And you could just play with a lot of the Shurima units after that too. So both versions work. These are probably the two dominant ones right now. But unfortunately, it is another Fast 9 comp, so you do need the Econ to make it work, because if you don't get to level 9, the comp is literally useless. Next one up we have is AD Fast 9. If you ever get Draven Opener or Draven from an Orb, going to be an absolute insane unit to play around with, especially when paired with any attack speed item. But this one's always been one of my favorite comps. You have to play a little bit more aggressively. This comp is definitely harder to play compared to the AP Fast 9 comps, and it's not because of the patch. Like, AP is better this patch than AD, but despite all that, even if AD was better, this comp is still harder to play because you need to know when to roll for Draven. The difference between Draven 1 and Draven 2 is pretty big, because it's going to affect how much gold you're able to farm and ultimately save HP with in the mid game. It's not mandatory, but I do like playing this comp with one of the lesser duplicators for Draven just to get the upgrade pretty much guaranteed sometime in stage 3. And it makes the rolling just a lot easier to play with. But the endgame board is going to be built around Lucian, Senna, and Kindred. Tanks in the front line going to be Skarner and Taric plus random legendaries. So you pretty much have infinite people to itemize. You don't need item augments, but it is kind of nice to have. The only reason why you would want an item augment is if you don't have items for your Draven in the early to mid game. But if you don't have that, I'd probably ask you why you were going to this comp in the first place. But I'd say this is overall like an intermediate comp. It's not like the hardest comp ever, but it does take a little more thought to play around with. But obviously the same principles for Fast 9 still apply. So if you don't meet those requirements, probably can't play this comp. Next build up we have is Ionia Ahri. This is a great comp to play around with if you need to reroll. So if you don't get any of the Fast 9 openers, what you can do instead is open Fort. And I'm going to talk more about this in the opener video coming up on this patch in a couple of days. But essentially what you can do is just lose streak and then go into some reroll comp. This is going to be the first one we're going to be covering. So reroll comp means you want to get a lot of gold and then roll at optimal levels. And when you lose streak, you pretty much hard force getting a bunch of extra gold. So this is going to be a 3-cost reroll. You're going to be playing around Kennen and Ahri, both Ionia units. You pretty much just play all the Ionia units when you play Ionia Ahri. And then throughout the lose streak, you are going to be taking a beating, but once you hit stage 3-5, you're going to go to level 7 and then roll down for Kennen 2, Ahri 2, and then super stabilize at that point there. Items for Ahri going to be Double Nashor's Jeweled Gauntlet. Items for Kennen going to be the 2 utility items. And then secondary carry going to be either Set or Yone, depending on whether you could even make it to Set. Because sometimes when you do 3-cost reroll, it's going to take a while to get the 3 stars. And then for Set, you do need level 8. So it can get a little tricky sometimes, but most of the time you do get Ahri 3-star. And then you're able to level up pretty easily if you do have a reroll augment. So reroll augment's going to be anything that gives you rerolls or champion duplicators, the lesser ones. And another way to kind of get free rerolls is by playing Bard in the early game as you're lose streaking, because every time you lose, Bard gives you rerolls. So that's another nice little way to get extra econ, but Bard is sometimes tricky to get. But let's move on into the next comp, which is going to be the Targon Malzahar, another reroll option out there. Like reroll, a lot of them are going to be in the A tier because it's not your first choice, but it's a very, very decent backup plan. Both the Ahri and the Malzahar comps, they have the same item combo, like the Double Nashors plus Jeweled Gauntlet. But this one runs a little bit differently in that you want to do the solo tank Leona tech, where you just put stone plates on her, isolate her in the front line, and pray that she lives. After that, you can also 3-star Zoe as a secondary carry, as there are a lot of different units you can itemize with in this comp. But the rest of the comp is pretty self-explanatory. They're just complementary traits. The Nico Vi combo is a very popular combo throughout the set because it just gives you access to like 10 different traits. You add in Kog'Maw for Arcanist and Void. You add in Seraphine for Piltover and Disruptor. And despite having a bunch of Targon units, you have actually like a decent amount of traits that are active on your board, which is pretty nice. By the way, don't worry too much about 3-starring Nico or Vi. Just focus on all the 3-cost units. So same exact playstyle as before. Just go lose streak with Bard. Get to level 7, roll down, stabilize, get 2-star damage dealer and tank. Win a couple rounds, and then econ back up, slow roll down to 50 every turn, find a time to all in. Ideally, if you have a reroll augment, it helps a lot. And then hit your 3 stars, power spike, and try to bleed out as slowly as possible. If you get your 3 stars for free, you have a chance to like win the game. But if you don't, if you get it at normal time, you probably are going to get like 4th or something like that. If you get lucky, maybe like a 3rd. It really just depends on how early you hit. Like every turn that you don't hit when you're supposed to is just like -1 placement. So unfortunately, that is the case with reroll. But it's a little bit more consistent than I'm giving it credit for, because you do the free lose streak, so you pretty much get the same exact start every time. Get the Bard rerolls, stabilize on 3-5 usually, and then use your like gazillion rerolls that you farmed up to ideally hit some of your units for free. And then ideally, since you're lose streaking, you get perfect items. So that's pretty much how most reroll comps work. And like, you don't have to perfect lose streak. It does help, obviously, but if you happen to win by accident, or if someone else is lose streaking also, it's really not the end of the world. Next build up we have is Noxus Reroll. If you ever get an early Sion drop, this is a really good comp to play, because you just get to unlock LeBlanc really early, and then you just get to play around LeBlanc and Darius. So this build's really good because it gets into a really good late game. Some of the other reroll comps we looked at, they don't really have too much like bomb potential late game. Like, yeah, Set is good, but like Mel is like a lot better than some of these other units, right? So you just go straight into Noxus, you play around the LeBlanc and Darius reroll, and then if you hit them early, you could level up, fit in Mel in your team, and then get items for her too. One thing to think about in this comp though is don't get baited by the other 3-cost units to 3-star. That's going to be Kabuko and Yuumi and Draven. I mean, if you really get them absolutely for free and you get items for them somehow, then yeah, it is okay to use. But you really just care about Darius and LeBlanc, so I would just focus on those unless you get like absolutely insane Draven items as well. So that's just one other thing to think about whenever you play this comp. One other weird thing is Darius's items are a bit different. It's going to be like the Titan Sterax build, so it does play out a little bit differently than some of the other team comps that you're normally used to, where you go like 3 pure tank items or like traditional tank items on your main tank. But Darius works really well with these item combos. If you want to be sweaty, again, use the data site, teamfight.lol, type in Darius, type in LeBlanc, and then just look at Darius's items. He's going to have the Titans and Sterax, and you're going to see that it performs a lot better than some of the other traditional tank items that he could normally build, or that you do normally build on a bunch of your tanks. Another thing to note is that artifacts are really good on Darius. Artifacts are just good on reroll comps in general, so pretty much for all the reroll comps we went over, if you ever get offered Radiant or Artifact items, they definitely are decent takes. Next build up we have is Jinx Flex. This one is especially good for lose streaking, because you get the Singe unlock for free, and that just helps you stabilize so much whenever you're playing this, or whenever you're lose streaking in general. Like, yeah, the 3 costs are nice to have. Like, you still want 2-star Mundo, 2-star Jinx on your roll down, but just getting Singed very easily, because his requirement is just lose 35 player health and field unique Zon and Juggernauts. It just makes playing the game so much easier, because imagine, like, what are you normally playing when you're playing into Zon? Like, you probably have some, like, random tank up front instead of the Singe. Let's say it's like a Poppy, or let's say it's like a Rumble or something like that. Like maybe you had Vi out there, you're like, oh, Rumble and Vi. Like just getting a Singed is just so much better than that Rumble, right? So that's why I kind of like playing Zon comps. Like Zon is low-key one of my favorite comps of the set, just because I really like the Singe unlock mechanic. Unfortunately, Zon hasn't been that good for most of the set, but it does have some time to shine right now. The end comp is going to be the 5 Zon with the Jinx Vi Warwick combo, and then you just add in Mundo and Singe, and then add in complementary traits. So you want Gunslinger for Jinx, you need Quick Striker for Warwick, perfect combo there with the 2 legendaries, and then just make sure you have some Bruiser in there. Wukong's obviously going to be the ideal one, and then Juggernaut is going to be good with Singe. So pretty much everything in this comp has like really good synergies with each other. After that, get a lot of bows for your team comp, because you need 1 for Warwick for Titans, and then you need 2 for Jinx for Rageblade and Kraken Slayer. Rageblade, Kraken, probably non-negotiable for Jinx. Probably just are going to be the best item combo on her, just because she needs to attack, and like, I mean, that's what she does. If you have an auto attacker, Rageblade Kraken, you could pretty much never go wrong with it. Next build up we have is going to be the Ionia comp. This one's going to be focused around Yone, and this is another one of those fast 8 comps, so we're moving off from the rerolls right now. Like, obviously, the best level 8 comp, I think, is the Kai'Sa build, but if you get Ionia start, you know, you got to play Ionias. And if for some reason you can't go into reroll Ahri, then you want to do something like the Yone. So one thing you can do when you play this comp is don't forget to buy Garens during your roll down, because you do want to play Sylas in this board. Sylas is just OP. He's really good. But what I like a lot about this comp is that you could play pretty standard into level 8 and not do anything too crazy, but you still have some really good win cons in the late game with 2 different legendary units to play around with, Set and Sylas, and then you also just have a random extra slot. Like, you don't have to play Lucian. That's just a random unit. You could play like Taric, you could play maybe even something like a Skarner or something like that, but I prefer something more in the back line, just because you run a lot of melee units, you don't really need another frontliner. But some of the reasons to play the Ionia comp is if you get a really good Ionia path. So XP, Spirits, or Blades is going to be the preferred ones here. Not the end of the world if you don't get them. It's just going to be a tiny bit worse. But if you get some of the other ones, like go for the Ahri, you know, like what did we have listed out for Ahri? We had Transcendence and Spirit. So yeah, if you get Transcendence, go for Ahri. If you get some of the other ones, go for the Yone. But honestly, for both of them, you could play either. It really more depends on what items you're getting and what units you get dropped out there. So yeah, I like this comp a lot just because I'm more reroll and level 8. Fast 9, like, yeah, I do enjoy it sometimes, but I feel like I play best at level 8 and reroll. But next build up we have is the Bilgewater comp. This one's a little bit weird. Like, Bilgewater, I think, is just such a tricky comp to play throughout the whole set. The reason why this comp is hard to play is because playing around with your shop is a little bit difficult. It's not very intuitive, and you also need to know like what to spend it on every single patch, which kind of changes a little bit. So right now, like obviously the items are good, but you're not trying to like spam infinite items for the Bilgewaters. There are some key ones that we do talk about in the full guide down here. You could also just see them on the champions, but we could take a look at some of the items we have here. Getting any of the tank ones on Tahm Kench is super duper duper helpful. I'd say for Tahm Kench, the most important item is going to be like Protector's Vow and then any of the tank ones, but the Citrus one's pretty solid there. MF, the best item for MF is probably going to be First Mate's Flintlock because it gives critical strike, which is one of the stats that she really likes. But honestly, like any of the offensive ones work really well on her. Pair it with a Shojin, it just gets her to cast a bunch. And then for the rest of your items, just drop them onto Lucian. Like Lucian builds the same exact items as Misfortune. The items for Misfortune is just like IE Shojin, same thing for Lucian. We could go into the Explorer tool over here. We'll put in Misfortune, we'll put in Lucian, and we'll put in Tahm Kench. And we'll see a couple of sample builds that really shape out this team. So obviously we talked about the IE Shojin, but it really depends on how many you have of them. I prefer it onto my Lucian, so that's why you have room for the other items for Misfortune. There's the Flintlock that we talked about, the Phantom Dancer, and then also like the Palace Citrus for Tahm Kench. So there isn't anything like too crazy going on here in terms of the items. It's really just mana tank items for Tahm Kench, and then all the caster items for both Misfortune and Lucian. So just build as many of them as you can. They both can use the items. Next build up we have is going to be the Void Kai'Sa build. Void Kai'Sa, okay. You may have noticed that I talked about the Kai'Sa Demacia build before. So I wonder which unit is going to be, or which trait is going to be better with Kai'Sa right now. We have the 5 Demacia, which is doing 4.03, or we have the Voids, which is honestly doing pretty fine too at 6 Void, 4.09. The thing is, a lot of this 6 Void data might be because you got Baron and then dropped down back to 6 Void. So if we exclude Baron, what happens? So let's do that right now, and we'll see that 6 Void is garbage. So that's kind of the difference between the Kai'Sa builds right now. The Demacia one is a lot better for this exact reason. This is why it's like very easy to get fooled by stats. You could just look at, oh, 6 Void was, what was it, 4.02 or 4.09 or something like that, which sounds pretty good, but it's not if you have to have Baron, right? Because if we excluded Baron, it went to 5.8 or something like that, right? And Baron is very difficult to get because you need level 10 to get him. So if you're playing Kai'Sa, play the Demacia version, don't play the Void version, unless you can make it to 10. So what are situations where you can do that? Because it is very, very good, right? Level 10 is going to be reached if you go for an augment called Win Out, which pretty much just gives you level 10, or if you are on like a econ portal with an econ augment. But with any double combination, sometimes even triple combination, you can get to the Baron board. But let's talk about this 4 Juggernaut 4 Zon board. It obviously isn't as good as the other versions, but it definitely is still playable out there. And sometimes, as you can see here, it's going to be doing like 4.7 something, and you might be asking, like, why would you play this? Well, sometimes you're just forced to. And just because something's below average doesn't mean it is completely useless, right? Sometimes you're put into a spot where you kind of have to play this because everything else is contested and you just hit the units for free. In those cases, you're probably going to do better than the average because you played it from a very optimal point in time. But let's go on into the next build, which is going to be the Ixtal build. Ixtal's still pretty solid. It just isn't the super giga optimal way to play right now because if you can fast 9, like you just play the regular Annie board, right? Like this comp also uses Annie, which is still very solid, right? But it's a lot less risk, and sometimes in life at least, like you don't want to take risk if you could get something guaranteed for good, right? So if you ever are in a position to fast 9, just do the regular fast 9. Doing the Ixtal stuff in combination with that makes it really, really difficult, and like the execution that you need, like the skills that you need to pull that off is very tricky. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's just unnecessary complication, you know? I kind of like to simplify life a little bit, especially in TFT, because TFT is a pretty intimidating and complicated game. So if you ever are trying to fast 9, and you're like, oh, like I saw the Ixtal build on bunnymuffins.lol, know that it is good, but the other comps are just so much easier to play. I'm going to leave it in the A tier, though, because it is a good comp, but that's just my warning to everyone. You are free to do with that information as you wish. But yeah, do the quest, do the Ixtal quest, get Ixtal early, win streak with this so that you live a lot longer and are able to farm the quest for longer. And then you just play the Brock plus the Annie board that you normally play with the Ixtals. So that's going to be Nico and Skarner, and then Annie and Tibbers. I'm sure there are ways to play Sylas if you really want. Like you could take out Swain or Nico. Like you don't really need the Ixtal in the late game. It doesn't really do that much. Brock is just going to be absolutely hammering people, but you kind of don't have items for that many units. So that's why you kind of don't need the Sylas, because you have Brock to hold a lot of items with. So Brock, Tibbers, and Annie, that's like 3 item users plus whatever random legendary you're playing. Like, yeah, you don't absolutely need the Sylas to win super late game, because ideally Brock should be doing that. Like you don't need too many win cons in TFT. You really just need one of them. And as long as you hit that and hit it hard, like you're going to be more than good to go. But that's going to round out the A tier. The B tiers, again, they're still solid to play. They're just going to be slightly worse than everything else. You know, like you are going to be forced to play them maybe in like 10% of your games. You're not going to be that happy about it. But, you know, if you get the units for free, you get the units for free. If everything's contested, or if like your line that you want to go is like super contested, like you have to switch off sometimes if you're the odd man out. So in summary, and by the way, I will be covering all the openers in the opener guide coming out in a couple of days. But Fast 9, still king or queen, whatever you want to call it. And then Reroll, I think, is just really, really reliable. Fast 8, it's really just the Kai'Sa comp. Sometimes the Yone comp can compete with it, but in terms of Fast 8 or level 8 comps, it's mainly just Kai'Sa. And sometimes with Kai'Sa, you still do the reroll for Vayne. It's just played a little bit differently than all the other rerolls. But yeah, Fast 9 or Open Fort reroll. That's going to be the 2 main avenues to play this patch. So let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are. What are you going to be playing? What comp stuck out to you the most? And also let me know what you'd like to see in future videos and future sets. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this, and I'll see you all in the next one.